Special presenter, and I don't know, are you going to join Brian, or are you just going to let Cathy talk?
Kathy's basically
talking.
She and Jimmy Allen put this together.
All right, so without further ado, this Sunday's Adult Forum, Cathy Douglass speaking on behalf of ADA Inc.
Hey.
I'm still getting used to being called Cathy Douglass.
I know it's hard.
Yeah.
What's your name tag? Oh, your name tag's correct. Okay.
My name tag, yes. Yes. Brian has made sure that everything that I am named Douglas and everything I'm supposed to be named. So I'm very glad about that. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I want to help some of you, or all of you, if you can, understand this adventure that Brian and I have been on, and where we want to go with it, or trying to go with it, and how we're dealing with it, and how we started, and so all that gambit anyway. So we started with our business card, and we now have our logo. We've had our logo from the very beginning, and in the beginning, in March in 2015, that was the morning of what was going to be the original, officially closed by the U.S. Department of Justice, the settlement agreement. Well, Brian had come up with this wonderful idea, knowing how the city of Bend has worked on the ADA requirements. He decided that wouldn't it be a great idea to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and send the DOJ a letter about how unaccomplished the city of Bend was, even though they sent lots of nice pictures and everything. So Ryan did that, and then we continued to get letters back and forth. And the U.S. Department of Justice replied, and in their letter it states, we have decided not to take, to us particularly, because they considered what we were telling them a complaint against the city of Bend. And in their letter, the Department of Justice states that we have decided not to take any further action on our complaint. Unfortunately, because this section, the Civil Rights Division, receives thousands of ADA complaints each year, we do not have the resources to resolve them all. And I found that fascinating. Civil rights, they don't have the resources. Anyway, so moreover, our decision not to take further action does not affect your right to pursue your complaint in another manner. So then that gave us some spunk. We can do this in another manner. We don't need to have the DOJ completely behind us. We don't need to have, we can, as the two of us, begin to go ahead and grow and follow up on what we see as misnomers about ADA and what is needed. So we went to I know I'm going to bounce around a bit, and please forgive me. Okay. So the Department of Justice relied upon the evidence the city had submitted thus far, and is satisfied that the city had acceptably progressed in compliance with the settlement agreement. And so they closed the files at the end of the summer of 2014. Is that correct, or was that 15? 14. And but the letter said the city's obligation to complete all remaining remedial actions within the agreed upon time frame remains. So they had until March 15th from September of 14 to to go ahead and finish up all the sidewalks and curb ramps and everything in 6 months? Yeah, something like that, which was an impossibility. That was a 20-year thing. They have been given over 10 years to accomplish this, but they didn't pay attention to it because the DOJ didn't and was not going to enforce the issue. And that was the very frustrating part for advocates wanting to have this happen, wanting the DOJ to step up. Here is a survey that was done in 2010, and then the foresight to think as of December in 2013 that they would have compliant curb ramps and non-compliant. And then in the proposal for 2016 that they would have over 3,000 compliant curb ramps. They still have over 5,300 curb ramps that need to be completed. And they still have, later on about sidewalks, you'll see that they had 460 miles of sidewalks, and currently they're doing 1.5 miles a year to
Half.
1.5 miles.
One half.
One half.
I think the answer is that there are over 3,000 miles of non-compliant or non-existent sidewalk
Over 2
in-
million linear feet.
in the city of Bend. The 440 or 60 miles makes no sense to anybody because it just doesn't add up. So the city's already said they've got over 3,000 miles, and they're going to do a half a mile a year, which will take 200 years to complete.
2,000.
2,000 years. About the time of the second coming, right?
And they figure they're going to do 100 curb ramps a year, so it'll take them 53 years to get all their curb ramps caught up. And on it goes.
Okay.
So we've decided, okay, after finding out some of this information and finding out that we needed help. So Brian got on the phone and he called every disability rights oriented nonprofit organization there is in the state of Oregon. And the following became our supporters: the Oregon Council for the Blind, the Peace and Social Justice Team of Trinity Episcopal Church, Oregon Paralyzed Veterans Association, and Central Oregon Human Dignity Coalition. Out of, how many did you phone calls?
Probably 50 organizations.
Yeah, and they were in the state of Oregon, but they were also nationwide. So these people stepped up and said, yes, I'll help you. Yes, I'll make a difference for you. And they have. Because of Oregon Paralyzed Veterans Association, we were able to talk with an attorney just to get some legal standing, and he did it pro bono for over a year. Made a lot of difference for us. So then, this is the beginning of how Brian got involved. As a disabled person, he's always been interested in this, and as a disabled person, he has had to deal with other situations that he had to fight his way through. So in 1990, he and a fellow advocate joined forces and worked together on a variety of ADA-related issues for 8 years to get the city of Bend to become compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. In 1998, 2 other qualified disabled persons joined Brian and Naomi Price, and the Radical Cripples United was formed. And they were very radical. Can't put us down. Nope, we're going to keep going. And the 4 of them decided in 2000 that a complaint needed to be filed with the U.S. Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division. The documentation was submitted to the Department of Justice in September of 2001. The DOJ respected the quality and amount of work received. What was it, 8 notebooks?
About 1,600 pages.
About 1,600 pages from the local advocates. They were very impressed that it hadn't been done by lawyers. It was the best they'd received and not done by lawyers. The DOJ validated all the local advocates' claims plus some. Then the DOJ approached the advocates and with 3 options to have the City of Bend become compliant: federal litigation, mediation, project civic access. The advocates chose project civic access, which became the settlement agreement. Can you remind me why you chose project civic access?
Well, we chose it because we had 10 years of experience with the city and very little to show for it. Very tired of dealing with the city, and as it was non-productive. We didn't particularly care for the federal litigation at that point. Mediation we were absolutely not interested in doing. And this Project Civic Access was designed as a program by the department to educate cities and municipalities on their obligations to meet the ADA law. And we thought that with the Department of Justice behind all of this, it would certainly be resolved, and the 4 of us then basically stepped away from the issue to take a breather and let the city work with the Department of Justice.
And the City Council approved the terms and conditions of the settlement agreement in September of 2004. However, the City of Bend delayed the signing of the agreement for about 2 months. They couldn't decide who was going to sign the agreement. This required the DOJ to make a second visit to Bend to finally get the secured required signatures. So in the following information, you'll be able to see that this information taken from the city's website. There was at least 6 years before action was started to meet the requirements of the settlement agreement. This is what the city says, that in their past accomplishments, in 2010, that's 6 years, conducted a field assessment and inventory of all pedestrian ramps, curb ramps, that have been altered or constructed since 1992. So the information they have, the City of Bend has wonderful information about the work that they have done and about the work that they haven't done. They have been very truthful and keep us apprised of all the things that still need to be done. But they are very excited about what they have done. So now we realize that, okay, the City of Bend has told us that they cannot look at the past, and we understand that. I mean, you can't really take care of the past. But it gives you such a backlog of what there is still to do. So what do you do about that? Well, we started looking around, and we realized that the City of Bend is not the only city dealing with this. There were 168 cities or municipalities that signed settlement agreements. We don't know where they stand, but we know where we stand. We know, and we know of other cities, many other cities, that are far below any kind of even, many of them are at low standards. They feel that, well, I got a curb ramp over here, and I got a curb ramp 2 blocks down there, you know, and so you have to cross the street to get to that sidewalk to be safely on that sidewalk. Then you have to cross back, and then you have to, you know, you zigzag your way through town sometimes just to be safe.
So
If there's sidewalks at all.
is that in the state of Oregon?
No, not
Or is
just in
that
the state.
nationwide?
That's nationwide.
Okay.
So that's when we realized that this is just not about Bend. So in the fall of 2015, we decided to become a nonprofit. We knew that ADA Inc., to be able to get funding from other foundations and other groups, we needed to become a nonprofit. Okay, well, it was like talking to other people, corporations and foundations and things like that, and wanting them to come and help us and be part of our coalition. That's what had happened. We would go up and we'd talk to people and we'd say, wouldn't you like to be on our board? Because this is what we're trying to do. And they say, oh, thanks, no, I've got plenty to do. And a lot of people did that, and that's understandable. But it left us knowing that we're not going anywhere if we don't have a nonprofit. We're not going to be successful. We're not going to move forward. We're not going to be able to get funding unless we're a nonprofit. So family came to mind, and family stepped up. Josh Grant, he is my oldest son, and his background is in banking. And he's pretty darn good. But that's my mother, you know, the mother talking. And, you know, anyway, so he said yes, he'd be president. And then Chris Douglass, okay, I'll be secretary. John Fairham, okay, I'll be treasurer. But they're just fill-in spots. They know that they help us on the outskirts, but they are not really board members. We still need board members. Anybody want to stand up and say, okay? Okay, not yet. All right. Brian and I are only employees of ADA Inc. But we're the ones that we sort of drive the boat. We keep it going. And we have the support of our family. And Rod Gust, just at the beginning of September, has said that he would be our vice president. And that in itself is really huge, because there's a lot to do, and there's a lot that we do. And we do it on our Social Security income. And we've gotten along pretty well so far.
Just an intersected point. Obviously, the Josh's position with his experience in banking and finance obviously is a critical play. Rod has experience in construction and design, and one of the things that I think many of you know the name Rod Gust, being Lloyd's oldest son.
Yeah.
So he has great experience in design and construction. Obviously, a big part of what we need to consult with cities and municipalities about how to build curb ramps properly and sidewalks. Plus, an element that we are adding into what we plan to do down the road is to finance putting ramps into homes on private property for people with disabilities, and he will be a great guy to do that. So again, and John is also a construction person as well, and very knowledgeable. So doing things like setting up a microfinance program, doing things like putting together ramps for people with disabilities who are not able to afford them. We just recently put in a proposal to the Park and Rec here to suggest that we would work with them to build a park specifically for the purposes of for children with disabilities. You're talking $250,000, maybe $500,000 to do that, but Bend has everything. It's got all this great stuff. You know, the waterfront park and the pavilion and the pools, but there's not really a park for children with disabilities that's fit just for them. And so that's part of what ADA Inc. is all about.
What did they say?
We haven't heard from them just yet, but we expect to hear from them. And so the point is that ADA is for the purposes of the private enforcement of the law, but it also has got other tentacles out there already being talked about as to how we can be effective. And the other point that's important too is the city of Los Angeles, for example, which just signed a $2.1 billion agreement with the city of Los Angeles to bring their sidewalks up to standard. That was a group of lawyers. So that was a law group that put that together along with some advocates and some clients. They're not for profit, they are for profit. And we believe from the beginning that a nonprofit status like Disability Rights Education Defense Fund in Berkeley, Disability Rights Law Center in LA, Disability Rights Oregon here in Portland, nonprofit status was the way to go. And I mean, we could easily go out and just hired a bunch of attorneys and walked into town like the Magnificent Seven and take over and do it. But that's not the way we're doing our work, and you'll see as it rolls out that that's not our philosophy.
Ken?
How many members do you have in the ADA Inc.?
Well, ADA Inc. is not a
Oh,
member.
let's get down to the Make Bend Accessible,
Okay.
and I'll be able to
Yeah.
show it.
Go to that.
Okay. So, our organization is registered in the state of North Dakota because that's where Josh lives. Seems like a good place to go. And his life experiences, okay, I had to say something about that because I'm his mom. Anyway, but the registration in North Dakota is important because it is known for having one of the largest populations of returned veterans, many of which now have a disability. December 14th is when we officially became Advocates for Disabled Americans Incorporated. We decided that was a really good Christmas present, said Merry Christmas to ourselves, okay, let's start working. And we started working and making appointments with the city of Bend, and we made appointments throughout North Dakota when we were there to meet people and, get to know the people in the community and the people we could work with that helped them and they could help us. And we have working relationships there and here. And here's some more facts that have been gathered from Bend. As of the 2010 survey, the total curb ramps is 7149, but actually it's over 8,500 as of January 2016. 5,300, this is where I got my non-compliant curb ramps. 5,311 are non-compliant. So if we do 100 a year, and that's what the city of Bend has proposed, it will take us 53 years just to get those done.
But it's also true that, as you see in the upper one, they had hoped to get 3,192 done between
Yes.
2013 and 2015, and I believe they got about 300 done. Is that not correct?
That is
and
correct.
every year the numbers change due to budget and money in, money out.
Yes.
The other thing that's important too is the city's going to pick up 2,300 acres of rural land by the end of the year under the urban growth boundary. That is going to provide a need for more sidewalks and curb ramps. Nobody knows how many, and nobody at the city knows how they're going to pay for any of that infrastructure.
they're hoping, they're working with the developers on that.
Yeah.
So that that's what they're saying, that's what they're thinking is, okay, we'll get the developers to do it. And part of that is, what did we find out? That they just hired an enforcement guy, so that's a real possibility that it might work now. They haven't enforced it before. They haven't had an enforcement person for how many years?
So I don't know, but
Yeah.
So when they build a new construction area, they don't put in,
no, they do
Handicap
now.
ramps?
They do now put in curb ramps
And
sidewalks.
in new areas now.
Yeah.
So you
But-
talk about the urban growth, that should not probably add numbers because they will automatically.
Well, you're maybe not. Who knows? I mean, at this point, and you're not only talking about that growth, but you're also talking about there's a requirement under ADA for the maintenance of accessible features. Everything that was built since 1992 has to be maintained. Go around town and look and see. Most of those facilities are crumbling as we speak. You add those to the number, it may take 4,000 years to get the sidewalks done. But it's a daunting task.
Yeah.
It's expensive,
Yes.
but there's no way around it.
We went to the city on July 20th in a work session and gave them a proposal of how to raise money to go ahead and pay for this in 12 to 15 years, to get them caught up in 12 to 15 years. It would cost the person who used water and sewer in the city of Bend $15 a month, $15.50 a month, to be able to raise the money to do that. And so then we asked for that to go over the 12 to 15 years. $15 a month was about a little over $700 a year. And everybody would pay for it. Not, so everybody and all the citizens. And since it's a civil rights issue, it seemed only fair to share it because it's all about civil rights for all of us. We are going to be disabled. I have my own disabilities. Brian has his own disabilities. Friends of ours have their own disabilities. Jimmy has his. I mean, we're not immune to being disabled. So, but the city of Bend chose not to go with our solution. And
Why did you pick sewer and water?
picked sewer and water because it was a city-owned utility, and also picked sewer and water because then the city of Bend residents, everyone would be involved with taking care of their neighbors. We would be involved with that as well. It wouldn't just be, you would help me in that respect. I would help you in that respect. At only $15 a month. People think it's expensive. It can be expensive when you're on a fixed income. But to me, it's part of the Christian duty to take care of our neighbors. And it's not just taking care of me, but it's taking care of you. That's my philosophy.
The other part is that there's two elements here that stick and need to be explained. One is no civil rights have been granted in this country outside of the women's suffrage movement by a public vote. We don't go out to the public and say, hey, there's a group of people over here that are this way. Do you want to give them their civil rights? It's not the way we do it in this country. We do it by the Constitution, the rule of law, and the Bill of Rights. So the city needs to stand up and say, hey, this is our obligation. We're not going to put it out there for a vote. and this does not require a vote. They can actually put this charge on, and it's not subject to a public vote. That may sound terrible to some people, but if you understand what I just said about the rationale of how you do civil rights legislation, that makes sense. The other thing is that the city's going through a growth spurt here for the next 10 years. It's phenomenal. They're going to add 17,000 more homes in this community at least. They're all going to get a chance to pay for the ADA improved requirements that we have. Some people say, well, let's drop it on the tourists. We gave the city a list of about 7 different options. They went through and looked at each one of them, at whether they could do it. If state law allowed. State law didn't allow in a number of cases. You can't add money to the room tax for this. And so the only logical answer was the surcharge for the utility fees. It was the only one that can work. And because they know that they can't go to the public and say, hey, we need $115 million in a municipal bond to take care of ADA. They're afraid it will not be approved. And they're scared to death also that they'll lose their jobs on the city council.
And that's the hard part. It is $150 million. And that's just the first year.
No, that'll take care of the program.
The whole
All
program?
the way through, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Because when you first collect it, you have to, the next year it's 3% more. It's the inflation rate is 3% is what they use.
We don't want to get into the weeds on municipal financing, okay?
Yeah.
So trust us
It
to
can be
know that
complicated.
we work with the city finance director and the city manager extremely well to gather the numbers, so that when we made the proposal, we knew it could fly. The only problem is that the 7 people on the council weren't interested. They've never been interested from day one, and these guys that are there now simply aren't. But you ask them where they want to go spend their dollars. Yeah, we're going to spend it on bike paths, and we're going to spend it on this and that, and Mirror Pond, and all these other things are great ideas, but you can't be a good city, a great city, until you have sidewalks and curb ramps and you meet the federal law for civil rights actions like this for ADA.
One of the things to note too is that the Parks and Rec Department, who is doing all this fabulous work about parks and on all the improvements of that, is a completely different tax system than the city of Bend. They do not work together. They separated some years ago. And so all that we get on our parks and the beauty of that does not have anything to do, nothing comes from the city of Bend on that. So one of the things that we noted when we were going through is that we wanted to know there's neighborhoods that have priorities about how come they get the most, like Wells Acres neighborhood was shown to be needing a lot of work. They had 23 requests, barrier removal requests. So they decided that they were going to work on Wells Acres and the 23 requests. And the 4 corridors in the Wells Acre area is Butler Market, Wells Acres, what did we decide, Jimmy? It was
Probably 27th and Purcell, both of those.
Yeah, and so that's those areas. When you go down Wells Acres Road, one of the things you'll note is that there is a lot of crumbling sidewalks, not sidewalks, curbs. There's a lot of crumbling curbs, but and some of them that have been fixed up with curb ramps, but no sidewalks to go with the curb ramps.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, it's very confusing and it's very frustrating. and the bus pads, the new bus pads, they're very confusing and very frustrating as well. But we focus on curb ramps and streets. And, curb ramps and sidewalks. This is one of the bus pads,
Why don't you let Jimmy explain these pictures?
this one, I've only got one,
Oh.
so yeah,
Oh, this
But-
is on Butler Market Road.
yes.
And the city claimed they were 100% compliant with all bus pads in 2014, that each bus pad is a cement pad with 2 ramps. This is a patch of gravel. That's absolutely treacherous if you're on a cane or a walker, impassable on a wheelchair of any kind.
Unless you have the big fat tires, you can do that. But one of the things I truly admire, and the work that has been going on for years and years, is COCA in educating the public. They get together every 6 months or so, and they pull in a lot of the community and the mucky-mucks in the community, the mayors, the public works people, that sort of thing, and they let them go around in a wheelchair and try to go up a ramp, and they teach them what it's like to be in a wheelchair, whether it's a power chair or physically powered chair, what it's like to be on canes and crutches. They've been doing this. How long has Carol been
Well,
doing
they
this?
picked up where we left off in '04.
Yeah.
What does COCA mean?
COCA is the Central Oregon Coalition for Accessibility.
So they draw together the bureaucrats in the different cities in Central Oregon each month,
Uh-huh.
and they talk about these issues.
Yeah.
But
It's,
the talk has been going on for so long that you wonder.
lately, Carol's been having, or there has been frustration in that in the last livability conference, they were all set up to teach people what it was like, and people had to walk through their area, and nobody even looked at them. Nobody even talked to them. John?
Let me ask you a question. Have they done an analysis of where our growth is coming from? I know what it is in Sisters. It's retirees.
Well, the growth for Bend has been retirees for many, many years, and the population in Bend is mainly seniors. But they have been getting a lot of the young people in, and that's what they're focusing on, is trying to get more young people in.
But the young people bring their parents.
Yes.
No, I agree. I mean,
And the young people don't want to think about disabilities.
no, I know. And Ben wants to be hip, cool, and groovy.
Yeah.
Yes. We call it the spandex crowd. And I really, it's just sort of, it's a label, and I hate labels, but I'm just as
Fits.
bad as everybody else. Yeah.
Well,
Any other questions? Yes, Jeff.
To that point, I'm sitting here, thinking, where are the leverage points where you can move people? And I was thinking about the Paralympics. They actually got better coverage in some ways in the local paper than the Olympics did. And I noted in there, and just trying to think of a leverage point.
Mm-hmm.
What if we had a wheelchair marathon here, so that people knew what's going on? I was up on Mount Bachelor the other day, way up there, and there was a man up there. I'm not sure what his disability was, except that he couldn't use his legs from the waist down, what the cause of it was. But he was up there cross-country skiing, roller skiing down the road, two arms.
I think that he actually gave a talk a couple months ago at McMiniman's.
Yes.
And he talked about outside accessibility, and because he's an outdoor guy. And
Terrific. I mean,
he
that,
had a stroke.
you want to talk to the spandex crowd?
Talk to him.
You see that guy going by, and I have a good friend of mine
He's
back
truly
in
amazing.
Arizona who lost a leg to cancer and lost part of another arm, and he just rode the road race in the Paralympics, and he could beat everybody in our cycling group hands down with one leg.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been on a bicycle, try to pedal it with one leg, just you can think about that. So the
I've
upshot
been
of
on
this,
motorcycles with friends with lost limbs.
there you go.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about how do you draw attention to those things, and for a spandex crowd, they really resonate with that, and they might be more supportive. Just thinking out loud. I'm looking for leverage points.
Yeah.
Churches are an obvious point. Churches need to be. I've had this battle in every church. My mother was deaf. Every single church I've gone to say, where do the wheelchair people sit? And they say, well, we put them in the back or in the front row. I said, what about in the congregation? Well, you'd have to cut a pew down. Well, they said, we don't. One church said to me, huge church I served, they said, we don't have any handicapped people here.
Okay.
Well, they couldn't even get through the door, let alone, up the ramp.
Jeff,
Thank you, Jeff.
To add to what you said, next Sunday, the Bend Open Streets is having a pilot project. I don't know if you've heard about it.
That's right.
Every season, they are going to close off one segment of town. And next Sunday, it starts at 12 and goes to 4. And it will be on Northeast Olney, closed down to 6th, across to Hawthorne, and then around to First. And one of the things to be highlighted by participating in this is that it is not accessible to handicapped people. And that's why they're closing the streets to all traffic. And everybody will be walking, riding, power chairing, whatever, in the streets. And so bringing handicapped people out next Sunday to demonstrate the lack of accessibility would be one way to bring this to the attention of people.
Yeah. That's a great thing. Thank you for. Yes.
This summer so I live on Auburn Butte, and they fixed all the sidewalks so that they had ramps, which is great, but I'm thinking, why don't we do that in town rather than up here in the Butte? I was like, really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really nice, but
It makes me think one of the city council lives up there.
yeah.
They did that, they do that. That's where the money is, and that's where they put their
I
thing.
would pay for that.
Go look at the Southeast Interceptor, the sewer that comes from improvement from King's Forest and through and around and up to Reed Market, and then it'll end up near the hospital.
Yeah.
They didn't put a single sidewalk in there. I understand that in some degrees, but they didn't put a single sidewalk in, and now they're going to put in 56 curb ramps.
Well, yeah.
Now, just a minute. They're
I
going to put
understand.
56 curb ramps in there in the next 2 years. Curb ramps that go nowhere.
There's no
Because
sidewalks
there's no
proposed.
sidewalks.
There's
to
no
connect
sidewalks
with.
proposed
That's crazy.
for it.
So you ask yourself what's going on. Well, ask Summit, the money. Ask out here and say, why even bother building a curb ramp on a street that doesn't have a sidewalk?
Yeah.
It's crazy. Go spend the 56 curb ramps at $2,000 a piece, someplace where there is a sidewalk that you can connect. Talk about a curb ramp to nowhere. We got a lot of this.
Okay, it's about 10 o'clock now, and if there's any last minute questions? Yes, sir.
I apologize because I walked in late, but how does the gas tax vote in the spring kind of inform your thinking moving forward? Because the public did soundly, I voted for it, and I see a huge need for it, but I think a lot of people in Bend have a real sense of distrust when it comes to the city managing or spending money, so the public
Yes.
really kind of resoundingly voted against it, even though I think most people would agree that Bend's roads are in awful shape.
That's true, and as you can tell from the history that we've had with ADA and about how they ignored that sort of thing for many years, it's the same thing. The city of Bend, and a part of the problem is because of their structure. It changes, the council changes every 2 years. They're looking at changing that, there's been talk about it, but that's all that I know of is that there's talk about it. There's no stability in the council, so there can't be stability in Bend about how to work with the funding. It can change every 2 years.
One final thought for everybody. The National Episcopal Church has a stake in the issues that include this issue. And when Michael Curry was here, he and I talked about that extensively. We had the fastest 5-minute talk about something that you've ever seen. And the resolution that was passed a couple of years ago almost now at the National Convention to reaffirm the ADA position of the National Church, Michael still has to deal with that, still on his desk. But they are actively involved. And when I went to North Dakota, I met with the rector of the Episcopal Church in Minot, North Dakota, because she was a person who was interested in disability rights. And saying, we will go everywhere we go, we will make contact with the Episcopal rector in that community. And we know that's a place to start, looking for advocates and looking for people who are concerned about the issue. So the Episcopal Church is involved in this issue, is very interested in it. Michael is very interested in what we're doing. And he, you know, we've got our contacts back there. And we use them to talk about what we're doing. So
We have a lot of support across the country. A lot of support we have Michael and we have members of the Episcopal Church helping, you know, as we go on. So, and that's about it.
Yeah.
We like to think we have a lot of support, and we do right here today. And I want to thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.